Good afternoon and welcome to the November 3, 2023 meeting of the Rotary Club of Beavercreek. Good to see everybody. I would like to thank Jonathan E. Frank and Bob Cochoy for being our greeters today. Appreciate that. Thanks to Eric Marcus for handling setup and Ticketmaster and other things. Pete Bales, Mark Weinstein, and Mike Swick for our great programs. Jim Gundel for handling the website. I would invite Vinny Jarvie forward, please. All right.
Well, good afternoon. Would you please join me in prayer? Oh, Holy Creator, as we enjoy our fellowship, help us remember how fortunate we are to be able to serve our brothers and sisters around the globe throughout our great organization and its astounding foundation. That we are prosperous, enable us to give our material wealth, that we are free, enable us to work together on projects, that we are generous, enable us to work together to achieve amazing successes, and that we are dedicated, bring us together as our club leaders and workers so that we may continue these efforts. Amen.
Thank you, sir. All right, Secretary's report, Mr. Jenkins.
All right, so we're at 60% today. We have quite a few guests. Pete, you want to go first?
I do. Yeah. I'd like to introduce you to my two kids, Jack and Kara. They are off school today, and so they have graciously joined us here and are going to help me campaign this afternoon.
Welcome.
Mike, we got yes.
Like you, John, stand up. This is John McKinnon, our effective new member, and he is the secret behind Live Drive 2. He is the guy.
Watch channel 2. I'm Live Drive 2.
Welcome, John.
Paul has a guest.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Got Jeff Mann, our director of student services. He's come with me a few times. For Pete and his kids, sorry that you guys are putting you to work today. The day off. Oh,
Welcome, Jack.
Shannon has a guest.
He's not here right now, but myself and Brianna.
Who's man in the shop? This is the workforce, isn't it? This is what else we got?
This proof that they're two separate people.
All right, I got that. Who else? Is that it? All right.
Except for having a sign sheet.
All right. Sergeant at Arms time. Don Adams, come on down. Settle down, everybody. Settle down.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Have a nice day.
As David said, today is November 3rd, 2023. It's day number 307 of 2023. We only got 58 days left. It's also Friday number 44. We still there's out of 52, so we still have a few of those left. And it is Friday number 1 out of 4 in November. So today we celebrate Cliche Day. Think of your favorite cliche and use it. Fountain Pen Day. Give someone $1 today. Day. I'll be around in a little bit. It's Jellyfish Day. Love Your Lawyer Day.
That's every day.
National Housewife Homemaker Day. National Sandwich Day. National Accessory Day and SOS Day. Some things that happened on this date in history. 1534, the English Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, making Henry VIII and all subsequent monarchs of the head of the Church of England. In 1883, the U.S. Supreme Court decided federal courts have no jurisdiction over Native American tribal councils. In 1900, the first U.S. automobile show opened at Madison Square Garden in New York City. I would have liked to have seen those cars at that show.
In 1906, the International Radio Telegraph Conference in Berlin selected SOS as a distress signal as a worldwide standard for help. In 1914, the first modern elastic brazier was patented in New York City by socialite Mary Phillips Jacobs. In 1917, first class stamp, 3 cents. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2 with space dog Leica aboard, a mostly Siberian husky, the first animal in space. And in 1975, U.S. advice columnist in Good Housekeeping, Ann Landers asked parents in a mail-in survey, if you had to do it all over again, would you have children? 70% said no. And in 2014, the New York's 104-story One World Trade Center officially opened 13 years after September 11th. In the club today, we only have one thing. Jerry Pfeiffer, his birthday was November 2nd. Is Jerry here? Let's see. I was celebrating his birthday. With voting day being next week, here's some interesting facts about elections. In the United States, individual states decide how and when to register voters, which is often led to confusion. Just 13 states allow voter registration on election day. In Canada, there is no deadline to register to vote. Voters are allowed to register when they arrive at the polls on election day. In France, citizens are automatically registered to vote when they turn 18 years old. And in Sweden, eligible voters are automatically registered when they turn in their tax registration rolls. Oregon is the first and only state in the United States to use automatic voter registration. In some countries, I think some people here in the United States would like this one, such as India, Greece, Ukraine, and Colombia, have a none of the above option on their election ballots. In the United States, only Nevada offers none of these candidates. There's over 22 countries in the world that require citizens to vote. Citizens who do not vote are typically subject to penalties such as fines and community service. Voter turnout in these countries is typically high. And in 1967, a brand of anti-chafing foot powder won the mayoral election in Ecuador. The foot powder company claimed that the product would bring hygiene and well-being to 4,000 townspeople. The U.S. trails most developed nations in voter participation. In 1872, the United States election, President Grant ran against a dead man. His opponent, Horace Greeley, died during the election process. And George Washington spent his entire campaign budget, which was 50 pounds, on 160 gallons of liquor to serve to potential voters. How do you start a fairy tale in the modern era? If elected, I promise. My boss arrived at work in a brand new Rolls Royce. Wow, I said, that's an amazing car. He replied, if you work hard, put all your hours in and strive for excellence, I'll get another one next year. Three older ladies were discussing the travails of getting older. One said, sometimes I catch myself with a jar of mayonnaise in my hand in front of the refrigerator and can't remember whether I need to put it away or start making a sandwich. The second lady chimed in and said, yes, sometimes I find myself on the landing of the stairs and can't remember whether I was on my way up or on my way down. The third one responded, well, I'm glad I don't have that problem, knock on wood. So she wrapped her knuckles on the table and said, oh, wait, who's at the door? If your home is hit by a dolphin, don't go out and look. That's how hurricanes get you. Story about degrees of blindness. First degree, a married couple were asleep when the phone rang at 2 in the morning. The very blind wife picked up the phone, listened a moment, said, How should I know? That's 200 miles from here. And hung up. The husband said, who was that? She said, I don't know. Some woman wanted to know if the coast was clear. Two blondes were walking down the street. One noticed a compact on the sidewalk and leaned down to pick it up. She opens it, looks at the mirror and says, this person looks familiar. The second blonde says, here, let me see. So the first blonde hands her the compact. The second blonde looks at the mirror and says, well, you tell me that's me. All right, one more. Blonde suspects her boyfriend of cheating on her, so she goes out and buys a gun. She goes to his apartment, and unexpectedly, when she opens the door, she finds him in the arms of a redhead. Well, the blonde is really angry. She opens her purse, takes out the gun, and as she does, she's so overcome with grief, she takes the gun and puts it to her head. The boyfriend yells, no, honey, don't do that. The blonde yells, shut up, you're next. One day I was walking down the beach with some friends when one of them shouted, look at that dead bird. Someone looked up in the sky and asked, where? They were walking among us. I used to work in technical support for a 24/7 call center. One day I got a call from an individual who asked what hours the call center was open. I told him that the number you dialed is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He responded, is that Eastern or Pacific time? I couldn't find my luggage at the airport baggage area, so I went to the luggage office and told the woman that my bags never showed up. She smiled and told me not to worry because she was a trained professional and I was in good hands. Now she asked me, has your plane arrived yet? No, ma'am. The pilot told us we were circling the airport. We're third in line to land. Then there was a man that was working at a pizza place and observed a man ordering a small pizza to go. He appeared to be alone, and the cook asked him if he would like it cut in 4 pieces or 6. He thought about it for some time before responding. He said, just cut it in 4 pieces. I'm not hungry enough to eat 6. And then there was a man that entered a bus with both of his front pockets full of golf balls. He gets to playing golf. He sat down to next to all people, a beautiful woman. The lady kept looking quizzically at him in his bulging pockets. Finally, after many such glances, he said, it's golf balls. Nevertheless, the lady continued to look at him thoughtfully, and finally, not being able to contain her curiosity any longer, she asked, does it hurt as much as tennis elbow? Yes, I like to leave you with a couple of positive things when you leave this place. It's not as much about what you used to. It's all about what you used to, about who you want to be. It's all about who you choose to be. And when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. Today's clients, if you're a lawyer, that's $1. If you love a lawyer, that's $1. Well, usually there's more than just two people. If you learn Morse code, that's $1.
You're running for mayor. That's enough.
That's $5. I wasn't going to say that. If you've ever read Ann Landers or Dear Abby, that's $1. If you're not registered to vote, that's $2. And if you're not wearing a Rotary pin, that's $1. Now over to David for Happy Bucks as he collects his money.
Who's got happy bucks? JD.
I got a happy, sad one. So last Sunday was the marching band's final performance at OMIA. They did Superior, whatever, the one rating is like the 34th consecutive year the sad part of it is that was the last time I got to see my son march in high school marching band. So it was bittersweet close to the season, so it was, a little emotional, but it was fun. So they're done, they did well, really good season, couldn't have gone out on better than.
Awesome. Well, glad you got to enjoy that.
Put two happy bucks in, our men's and women's cross-country team left today to head up to state, so we will be running both of our men's and women's team qualifiers, so we'll be running up there tomorrow.
That's a good program. All right, who else we got? Other happy bucks. All right. Okay, so let's do a ticket drawing here. You have a ticket for me, Tom?
Well, I thought you drew one.
No, I did not.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have one.
Thank you, sir. Remember that the club share of the jackpot is used for our Christmas basket project. The number today is 956490. The pot's pretty big. Mike Canada. All right. No joker.
Whatever card I pick, right?
Queen of Hearts, right?
Brandon had a happy buck.
Hot gross.
The pot grows.
Brandon had a happy buck.
Okay.
Let me see what it, let me read it from the chat. I'm happy because America's team is number 17. Air Force crushed Colorado State. So let's see Brandon, he owes $1.
All right. Okay. Anybody else with happy buck or announcements? Who's got announcements? Jim Rudd.
We'll be installing flags at Be Hope Church Monday at 4 o'clock, so if you can help us, and we will be removing them the following Monday at 4 on the 13th. So your help would be welcome.
All right. Any other announcements? So believe it or not, we have elections coming up here for next year's officers, next year board members. And so if you have an interest in serving, let one of the current board members know, or I listed the people who are the nominating committee, which is Don, Brandon, Mike Canada, Alex Zaharia, and Beth Cusack. So if you have an interest in serving, let them know. And I will have Mark Weinstein come up. Mike and Ty.
Thank you. I thought it was. So when you're introducing a legend, I feel it's important to look somewhat like the legend. Therefore, I pulled out my vintage 1978 bow ties that I wore as a grocery bagger at the Great Scott Food Store in Fremont, Ohio. So now for my introduction of Dr. Mark Caleb Smith, the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities. Dean Smith was an American basketball college head coach and was called a coaching legend by the Basketball Hall of Fame. Dean Smith coached for 36 years at the University of North Carolina, retired with 879 victories, which was at that time the NCAA Division I men's basketball record. During his tenure as head coach, North Carolina won 2 national championships and competed in 11 Final Fours. Smith was best known for running a clean program and having a high graduation rate, with 96.6% of his athletes receiving their diploma. Did Michael Jordan graduate? 8. After retiring, Smith used his influence to help various charitable ventures and liberal political activities, but in his later years, he suffered from advanced dementia and ceased most public activities. Today's Dean Smith is in good health, and he serves as the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities at Cedarville University. He has spoken to our club numerous times, so you know him well, but this is the first time he's spoken to our club as the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities. So welcome to the podium, Dean Smith or Dr. Martin Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Introduction was as handsome as your bow tie. Take that however you wish. But thank you. So I think my first slide says it all. Any questions? Can we just be finished now and get it over with? So I really thought about trying to come up with sort of a joke, a good lighthearted way to enter into the discussion. I waffled between massive depression and other sort of feelings in the process and decided to go with a political cartoon instead. Let's see if this thing actually works. Does it work? Click down. Click down. Click down. There we go.
Is it working?
It is working. So, I think this is pretty spot on. I can't tell a joke much better than this. So we have two candidates. Let's just say they have flaws, significant flaws, significant challenges, and that's just kind of where we are. Another one I think captures this a good bit as well. Let's see if this thing works. We're really struggling a little bit here. There we go. So we have here the donkey and the elephant, of course, saying so much for my fantasy picks. And they have their list of relatively suitable candidates there, but we're still going to end up with the two same candidates we had in 2020. And I think this is the way most of the country feels, frankly, and polling seems to suggest that. Not a lot of strong support for either candidate across the board, and even within their own parties, a significant amount of hesitation to what appears to be coming down the pike. So I call this the crisis of 2024, and I don't use that word lightly. I think we're undergoing a significant moment in our history where we have large amounts of the voting public that doesn't have faith in our electoral process, that does not have confidence in either of the two candidates that appear to be on their way to nominations. And that's a first, at least certainly in my lifetime. So I think we're looking at a unique moment. President Biden has serious health issues, which we'll talk about a little bit. President Trump has serious legal issues, which we will also discuss, and the Republican Party is divided. So how unpopular are they? All of these polls that I'm showing you information from come from 538.com. It's a website. They do a really nice job of giving you sort of a quantitative approach to politics. So I'd encourage you to look it up if you're interested in that sort of thing. But this is Joe Biden's approval rating. And his approval rating is hovering around 40%, and it's been there for quite some time. The pattern stayed pretty consistent. So he started out with a relative amount of goodwill, and then that evaporated soon, and it's really never come close to recovering. So roughly 40% of Americans approve of the way he's doing his job. President Trump. That's what we call a pretty consistent pattern. We just have two straight lines here essentially, and shockingly, his approval rating is around 40% as well. And so it feels like 40% of Americans are okay with either candidate, and the rest of us just get to go pound sand. It's kind of how it works right now. So I'm not sure either one of them could come close to a majority if people were being truly honest about it, at least at the moment. So according to the polling, President Trump's supporters are a little bit more excited about his candidacy than President Biden's are. I think President Biden's health concerns are eroding his support from the Democratic Party. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. They are in a statistical dead heat when we look at actual polling head to head, who would win a contest right now. It's within the margin of error. Neither one of them is ahead enough for us to have a good sense of it. Obviously, things could change dramatically between now and next November. I have a very good friend who insists that he thinks neither one of them will be the nominee.
of their party, which, I don't agree with that, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility. For me, this campaign feels like it's between two incumbents. So obviously President Biden has the benefits of incumbency, but President Trump, it feels like he has the benefits of incumbency as well. He is being challenged within his own party, obviously, and I'll talk about that. But that challenge feels a bit half-hearted and maybe not all that effective, at least at the moment. President Biden's fitness is a significant issue. 75% of Americans have questions about his mental and physical fitness and his age. That number suggests that a significant amount of his own party has those same concerns. 75% is a really large number when it comes to polling. And, to be really candid with you, they should have concerns. President Biden doesn't appear to be doing all that well, if we're honest about it, I think. When he appears in public, he's struggling. He has a very limited number of candid interviews with people. He rarely makes himself available to the media. And at least to my eyes, he appears to be in decline. It doesn't appear to be sort of at a plateau, at least at the moment. He also has legal problems, potentially. A significant amount of the population thinks that he did something illegal, potentially connected to his son and his family members. Another 25% think he did something wrong. And so you look at a majority of the country that has questions about him in terms of his behavior, rightly or wrongly, that's what's happening. 67% of Republicans think that he did something illegal. That's not exactly a shock. Obviously, it's something of a partisan issue, but I think you'll see that it's a little different for President Trump when it comes to the Democratic Party. 2/3 of American voters are concerned about President Trump's legal problems, again, as they should be. We've never had a president run for a nomination under indictment and undergoing trial. And, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, I'd have assumed I would never say that sentence. That it was a real concern that we have someone undergoing indictment and trial while he's running for the presidency. The key number for President Trump, I think, 44% of independents think he's done something illegal. Another 31% of independents think he's done something wrong. So 3/4 of independents have real serious questions about President Trump moving forward. And I think that actually will make it hard for him to win the general election. If we look at the numbers, if you ask about Biden and Trump, about half of independents prefer President Trump. But if you slip in a question about what if he's indicted, that drops to 33%. If President Trump only wins 33% of independents in a general election, he's going to lose the election probably pretty significantly. When we look back to 2020, he struggled with college-educated, suburban, white voters in places like, outside of places like Atlanta, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Milwaukee, go down the list. I think that problem just gets worse if he's indicted. And so my assumption is that he will bleed support among independents the worse that his legal problems grow. Which I think makes him, to some extent, unelectable in a general election. But we'll see. Obviously, things can change. 87% of Democrats think he did something illegal. Again, not necessarily a big surprise there, but that still is a really big number. So we talk about campaigns as political scientists. We don't just talk about candidates. We talk about the climate itself. What is the context in which this election is happening? I think it's clear the economy is still a drag on President Biden. When we think of sort of the timeline of this, there's still a year before a campaign happens, before the actual vote takes place. A lot can change in the economy, and a lot can change in people's perceptions of the economy over a year. And so who knows what things will feel like, but right now it seems like people feel like the economy's bad because their wages haven't caught up to the inflation of the past few years. That feeling, I think, is stifling President Biden. If that changes, then I think you might see stronger positive reactions toward the economy, which could benefit him. But right now, the economy is not a plus for him. Foreign policy could be a plus. It could be a plus. I think the foreign policy problems present President Biden with opportunities to lead and to lead strongly. Will he take advantage of those opportunities? Will he be able to seize them and turn them into pluses for his campaign moving forward? I think it's going to be a struggle. I think it's going to be a struggle. Right now, we're looking at the two major parties being divided over these questions of support for Ukraine and support for Israel. The Republicans are divided over supporting Ukraine. The Democrats are divided over supporting Israel. Roughly a third of each party is driving this division, whereas the biggest chunk of each party would be fine with supporting both. And so right now, sort of the major middle of the electorate is all in favor of supporting both. The polarized extremes of each party has a reservation with either or. Will we see sort of a congressional majority emerge that can put together bills to support both Israel and Ukraine? I suspect we will, probably. But we'll see. President Biden is going to pay a price for this, I think. If he continues to support Israel strongly, the left wing of his party is already upset at this. I think it's only going to get worse in the days and weeks to come, frankly. So it's an opportunity, but it's also a potential landmine for the president. I think when you look at Donald Trump, when we look at sort of the climate surrounding him, and we put aside his legal challenges, we put aside his past and everything else, he seems really stuck to a support base of people, and that doesn't seem like it's going to grow. He has a very strong, dedicated foundation of support, but it seems to be static. So can he credibly appeal to people to join him again? You know, it feels to me like Donald Trump is kind of, opinions about Donald Trump are baked into the equation right now. I just don't think people are going to change their minds a lot with him. Either strongly in favor, strongly against. Very few people have mixed feelings about him, at least in my experience. And so I don't know if he can really change that, candidly. President Biden could suffer a health scare, perhaps, that would cause people to reconsider President Trump if he wins the nomination. Maybe something like that takes place, but we will see. President Biden will benefit from being incumbent, but again, he's a struggling incumbent. He feels a lot more like Jimmy Carter or Donald Trump, maybe even struggling their way toward the general election campaign, as opposed to other incumbents in the past. So let's talk about the primary process that's taking place right now in the Republican Party. I have contenders there in quotation marks because I'm not sure there's much of a contest, at least as of right now. If we look at national polling, President Trump far outpaces his rivals to the point, as you know, where he doesn't feel the need to debate or do anything else to really campaign. The fact that he's under investigation and trial doesn't seem to be affecting his campaign at all. The fact that he can't do as many public events or hold as many rallies doesn't appear to be affecting his campaign at all. And so again, when I said it feels like an incumbent, this is the way it feels like an incumbent as opposed to a real contest. Probably the most interesting trend there is the pink line, which is Ron DeSantis's polling numbers ever since he got into the race. It's been a continual trend downwards for him. So he entered the race within good striking distance of President Trump, and it's been just a steady erosion since then. You know, I think if you put politics aside, I'm not talking about policies, he's just not a very good politician in the sense that he doesn't present himself very well or warmly. He doesn't appear to be all that likable. You know, he doesn't seem to be someone that people would be comfortable with. One of those questions you get asked a lot is, would you like to go to dinner with this person? With Ron DeSantis, I think the answer is generally no. Again, nothing against him. I'm not even saying he's a bad at anything. But the way that people perceive candidates now, you have to be likable. He doesn't appear to be all that likable. And if you watch him, even in the debate process, I feel bad for him. Being on television is really hard. I struggle being on television. It's complicated. It feels artificial. But when he's on television, even when he says something good, he then has to remind himself to smile. And that looks so artificial. When you see it, you're like, what is he doing? Like, he just started to smile. It just looked weird. And I think that's what he's struggling with. And I don't see that recovering. This trend line doesn't appear to be, you know, he'll make it to Iowa. Maybe. But I don't know if it's going to get much better unless, again, something dramatic takes place. Nikki Haley's trend has been a little bit in the other direction, not that strongly. I would assume, though I could be wrong, that she will overtake him in the polling within the next month or two, and that she will emerge as the sort of second tier candidate to Donald Trump, but we'll see. Of course, those are national polls that we were just looking at, and to some extent, national polls aren't relevant, as you know. This is a state-by-state contest. And so we look at Iowa. President Trump's support still strong in Iowa. He's close to 50%, not quite there, but he's close to 50%. Ron DeSantis is relatively popular in Ohio or in Iowa compared to other places. Maybe that'll continue, maybe it won't. I think Nikki Haley will probably struggle in Iowa. She doesn't appeal to that demographic quite as well for some reason. That tends to be a very, very evangelical, very culturally conservative place. I think she could speak that language. I'm just not sure she's all that appealing in that context. And for some godforsaken reason, we continue to let Iowa make the first decision. And so it matters what Iowa farmers think of Nikki Haley. Whether it should or not is obviously a different question. New Hampshire, President Trump still in good position in New Hampshire, which is the first primary. Of course, Iowa's a caucus. DeSantis has now slipped into third place in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley's in second place, and I expect that trend to continue. She's a much better candidate for New Hampshire on the whole. I think if she finishes second in New Hampshire and can narrow this gap with President Trump, we will probably end up with a competitive contest. We'll see. South Carolina, in some ways, this is the most interesting one. So this is Nikki Haley's home state, where she was governor not that long ago. And she trails President Trump pretty dramatically in her own home state. So again, that can change, but unless she could win her home state, it's hard to imagine her winning the nomination, obviously. So what are we looking toward here? I think we're looking at a two-person race between Haley and Trump. If it becomes competitive, I think that's what you're going to end up with. She appears to be consolidating significant donors within the Republican Party. We're already seeing other people drop out. Mike Pence has dropped out recently. Tim Scott's going to be dropping out here, I think, soon. It's hard for me to know where their voters go. You know, if DeSantis drops out, where do his voters go? Do they go to Trump? Do they go to someone else? My guess is they'll fracture. And so I think people kind of assume all the other candidates, when they drop out, their voters will go to someone who isn't Donald Trump. I think that's a bad assumption. So many of those people are willing to vote for Trump, but are preferring someone else. That doesn't mean they're going to stick with that someone else once people start to leave the race. I think when you look at the Republican Party right now, President Trump has a strong base of support. As I said, there's still a significant chunk of the party, maybe 20 to 30% at the most, that is anti-Trump. And then there's a group of voters who will make the difference. They're persuadable Trump supporters. In other words, they've supported Trump. They agreed with him to some extent. They're hesitant about him to some degree. Those are the ones that will have to be persuaded to join another candidate. And I don't know how feasible that is, but not everyone is firmly in one position or the other necessarily. Voting is a complicated process, as you know. I think also when you look at the polling, let me go backwards if I can, if it will let me. When you look at Donald Trump's, his numbers here, so he was indicted starting around what, April? Is that right?
Yeah.
And his numbers have just gone up. So any sort of assumption that being under indictment would drag him down as a candidate has not proven to be true empirically at all. If anything, I think that the indictments have strengthened his position in the field and have made voters consolidate around him as a defense mechanism. And it's benefited him. So if some of the goal to indict President Trump was to defeat him, that has backfired. We'll see. I think unless something significant happens, President Trump will win the nomination. Again, something can happen. Haley can emerge, maybe someone else can emerge, maybe national events will take place or international events. But right now, it certainly looks like it's Donald Trump's race to lose. I would argue, not a policy matter, but I would argue that the campaigns have mishandled the situation pretty dramatically. Ron DeSantis believed he could sort of be the good parts of Trump, but avoid the bad parts of Trump. But that just made him come off as sort of Trump light, not really what you want. And I think that was a mistake personally. I think he should have come out of the gate attacking Trump and running his record and running his electability. He decided not to do that, and I think that's part of why you're seeing a decline there. Nikki Haley, I think, was far too cautious at the beginning of the contest, and I think she suffered because of that. But again, we'll see. There is still obviously a good bit of time to elapse. I also think it's possible, and we've talked about this before, that we are in the middle of a partisan realignment. So realignment is when the political parties begin to reconfigure themselves to some extent. The demographic support groups of each party starts to reshuffle, and you see groups move back and forth between the two parties as a result of those changes that are taking place. The last major realignment, I think, that's inarguable took place in the early 1980s. When evangelical Christians moved into the Republican Party pretty dramatically, and white Southerners moved into the Republican Party pretty dramatically before that. And so those things together really changed the electorate to a great extent. I think it's possible we're looking at that happen right now, or we're looking at the movement of some groups that are going back and forth between the parties. Rural, white, blue-collar voters are moving heavily toward the Republican Party. That's been a trend for the last couple of election cycles. If that continues, it's going to change the Republican Party dramatically. It already has to some extent. African American and Hispanic men are open to competition now in a way they have not been historically. And so both parties are contending for those voters. Republicans have been more successful with them than they have historically. College-educated whites are moving toward the Democratic Party. And so if college-educated whites move toward the Democratic Party, and if blue-collar whites move toward the Republican Party, you're going to see pretty dramatic education and income gaps between the two major parties in a way that we just haven't seen. That would suggest the parties will emerge as sort of a class-based party where the Republicans are more middle-class, blue-collar, Democrats become more upper-class, upper-middle-class, educated elite, which feels like it's just a flip-flop from what we've seen historically, right? And so we'll see if that continues, but I think that's kind of where we are. Very quickly, issue 1, issue 2 are next week. I suspect both of them will pass. I could be wrong. I suspect both of them will pass. The polling has suggested that we will see. Question wording has affected polling on issue 1, because when you put different words in front of people, they react differently to issue 1. And there's a great deal of confusion surrounding issue 1, I think, to some extent. So, I want to be a little cautious there, but it looks like they're both probably going to pass. And I think what we're looking at is the Republican Party is far more divided on the issue of abortion than people would have expected. After the Dobbs decision, as these things have started to become political issues, outside of the Deep South, the Republicans have been divided over abortion. Within the Deep South, they've been pretty united. Outside of it, in places like Kentucky, Kansas, and maybe Ohio, you see division. And because that division, pro-choice policies appear to be ascendant outside of those Deep South areas, at least for the moment. Clearly, these things can change. I don't know how much time we have, but can we take a few questions? So a few questions if anyone has them. Yes, sir.
Previous page about the groups.
Yes.
Does religion come into play in this? Hispanic men are typically quite religious, and so I was just curious if you've seen anything along those lines.
Religion, the parties are already what we call sorted on religious grounds. In other words, they're already divided over religion, and so any shift probably wouldn't change that division for the most part. People who go to church more often, who pray more often, who choose labels, religious labels, like I belong to this group or that group, those people tend to be more Republican already. Okay. People who are less religious typically are more democratic. People who are no religion or atheist or agnostic are overwhelmingly democratic. And so those groups have already sorted. And I think it's possible that maybe Hispanic men would shift that a little bit, maybe, I don't know. African-American men have a complicated religious profile. When you look at the African-American community, at least statistically, women are far more religious and attend things. And so the different dynamic. That's a good question. Yes, sir.
So when you look at the change in Trump's polling
Yeah.
since the indictments.
Yeah.
How does this reflect on Americans' views on our court system, on our judicial system, and the laws in our country?
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that President Trump was able to persuade significant portions of the Republican Party that the federal judicial system was corrupt and weaponized. He also persuaded them along the same lines regarding the 2020 election. And we've seen those things kind of coalesce into what we're looking at right now. And it's a significant moment. That's part of why I would refer to this as a crisis. I mean, no matter what you think of who is right, who's wrong, what happened, what didn't happen, if we have 30 to 40% of American citizens who think that the federal government's judicial system is corrupted and weaponized, and who also think the electoral process is broken, that's a significant issue. And so the ramifications of that, I firmly believe, will be felt for a generation. Like there will be a ripple effect of that for a long time.
So that kind of makes us kind of like a banana republic now, where people just don't believe the government represents the people.
Well, I would argue there are people who believe we're a banana republic. That doesn't make us a banana republic. And so those are two different things in my mind. So certainly there are people who've been persuaded that we look more like that.
I would go with belief also.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
To follow this question, in the US, does a conviction in this case prevent him from running for president?
No.
No.
No. And I mean, if you want to get really hacked off, he could serve in office from prison. So, I mean, if you remember, James Traficant, for those of you that are Ohio people, James Traficant ran for Congress from federal prison and was able to secure, I think, 20% of the vote or so. And so he could serve from office in prison if he was elected. He could also try to pardon himself potentially. Obviously, though, he can't pardon himself from a state crime. So if he's convicted in Georgia and gets imprisoned in Georgia, let's just say, although I don't think that's what would happen, probably more like a fine or something else. He could not pardon himself from that. And I think, honestly, I don't think the Supreme Court would probably sit idly by if a president pardoned themselves, because that's I would argue that's an abuse of power to the point where it's an unconstitutional action. You know, the pardon power is not designed to alleviate the person pardoning his guilt. It's designed to alleviate other people's responsibilities. And so it would create a constitutional crisis. Yes.
There was a piece in the journal that hypothesized that President Biden could change his president or his vice president running mate to Barack Obama. How would that change the landscape?
President Obama could not serve as vice president because he has to be eligible for the presidency to serve as vice president. He's already served 2 terms in office. Presidents are bound to only serve 2 terms or 10 years. So he could not run as vice president. I think if President Biden would replace his vice presidential nominee, he could affect the election. You know, I think if someone like Amy Klobuchar or Gretchen Whitmer were vice president with Biden, he would probably be in a lot better position, politically speaking. And you know, he's not going to call me on the phone, but if he did, that's what I would tell him. So, yes.
So, I mean, Biden's health concerns, all these things.
Yes.
I mean, how does he get elected for another 4 years? And if he does, how does he serve or what does that look like? I mean, is it, I don't know, I haven't thought of that very well, but like, is there somebody else there or, like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more concerned, or how does that side, how does that work?
So the 25th Amendment was passed to declare a president incapacitated. The 25th Amendment was talked about being invoked when, on January 6th, when President Trump wasn't calling out the National Guard and things like that. There's a mechanism, if they wanted to, after the election, to just push him aside. Right? Say, yeah, we're done. It's also possible he'd resign, potentially. But I think what's more likely is what we've been seeing where, you know, he does limited public events, and I don't know enough about the Biden White House. I don't know who's making choices. I don't know whether his staff's doing most of the work and he's just kind of there, or whether he's really doing work. It's just not public work. Whether he's making the big decisions and they just sort of carry out everything, I don't know. You know, it's hard for me to imagine he would be fit to be president for 4 years more, frankly, but you know, the last 7 or 8 years have changed my thoughts on a lot of things. Yes.
How does the elected feel about the flood of illegal aliens by flooding those?
You mean, does it affect the way that people vote?
Yeah, is there been a poll on that or anything?
Sure. I mean, it's a significant issue, but I think it's one of those issues that breaks in a partisan direction. In other words, Republicans tend to be pretty upset about it, and Democrats tend to be less upset about it. And so it doesn't necessarily change outcomes because it's already going to affect people the way they vote anyway. Political issues become unpredictable when they force you to reconsider your partisan attachments. You know, oh my gosh, this has happened in such a way that I'm thinking about now voting for Democrats or Republicans I never would have before. Illegal immigration tends to push people in the direction they're already going. So in that sense, I don't think it's going to have much of an effect. It just purely is a matter of politics. Yes.
Do you think there's any impact in the view of President Biden based on the Senator Feinstein last days and months and years in office?
Yeah. I mean, certainly in my lifetime, I've never seen members of a party publicly question their own candidate's fitness for office, and that's happening. You're having Democrats take to editorial pages, to go to social media and say things like, you know, hey, Joe, you should really think about stepping aside. You should really be thinking about these other things. And so I do think there's a significant movement in the Democratic Party to sort of try to address this at some level. And I think Senator Feinstein's struggles, John Fetterman's struggles, which are different, but still, you know, you question his ability to serve sometimes. I think those have affected the way people are viewing this situation. But I firmly believe that Democrats have persuaded themselves that Joe Biden is the only person who can beat Donald Trump. Now, I think that's a mistake, but I think that's how they process this in their own minds, and they're just willing to write it out. I would think Trump was such a weak candidate that probably any credible Democrat would have beaten him in 2020, I believe, personally, but I could be wrong, obviously. But I think Democrats are convinced that only someone like Biden can carry it off. And so in their defense, Biden does represent sort of that meaty middle of the Democratic Party. And as a high profile Democratic politician, a lot of them come from more of the progressive wing of the party. And so that's what they're really worried about, is a more progressive Democrat struggling against Trump. But yeah, I think it has created problems for Biden. But I mean, honestly, the thing that makes it hard for Biden is just showing up on camera. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just when you look at the guy on camera, it just looks like he's struggling. And that's a real hard image to sell. Yes.
Is it possible or conceivable that we could replace Tackler, I mean, vice president with somebody else?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I think he should. I think it's possible, but I think he's worried about African Americans in his own party and, you know, sort of parts of the racial minority population looking at that decision negatively. So he's concerned about that. But I think in the end, it would be better for him if you're just looking at his politics. Yes, sir.
About, a third party candidate, and what might that do?
So according to recent polling that I saw, Mr. Kennedy is polling around 20%, which is remarkable. You know, for those of you, Ross Perot is the last third party candidate who sniffed. He was at 19%, I think, when he ran in 1992. 20% is a big number, and it would affect the contest dramatically if that number holds up. Believe it or not, though, my thinking is that probably pulls more voters from Trump than it does Biden. Because I think Kennedy's appealing to similar kind of voter in a lot of ways that Trump is appealing to. And so I think in some ways the Democrats might benefit from that. I would love to see a credible third party candidate. So I think, I mean, I'm assuming Kennedy is not a credible candidate, obviously, but I'd like to see a credible third party process or candidate. But the way that we run elections, the way that we put people on ballots, all those things argue against it. So it's not credible at the moment. You have to see structural change before that happens. Anyway, thanks very much. Looks like I'm getting ready to get the hook. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Not the basketball coach, Dean Smith. Yeah. As is our tradition, we are donating a book in Dr. Smith's honor to the community library, For Which We Stand. It's the name of the book, How Our Government Works and Why It Matters. Okay, so next week, Laura Hart from Closed at Work will be here to speak with us. David Brandenburg and Andrew Hunt will be our greeters. If Andrew Hunt is not in the jury trial, I suppose. Please keep an eye on our various outlets for what's going on with our club. Does anybody have anything else for the good of the club? Oh, and reminder, elections are coming up, so if you have an interest in leading, make it known and see what we can do. Anything else for the good of the club? All right, good rise to the pledge.
Brandon's question.
Do we have enough space for Brandon's question? It was probably like a 10-pager, right?
Yeah, it is. He can put it out for the meeting.
All right. Ooh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everybody have a great week.
Yes. Hi, Brandon.
My great grandson.
Never have a chance.
Veterans Day celebration.
Okay.
Eric.
Will not be in attendance.
Yes.
I can't wear my stuff. I don't think I'll wear my stuff. I think I'll just wear my. Into a couple of those. Those are kind of fun. Mark, sure know how to tie one on.
And you're good.
Thank you so much. Jack, you okay? You up all right?
That's what I thought. My children told me on TikTok. So. Yeah. And you want, oh, Dave was. It's not me, it's most of that. And she knows, well, when we first went out, I knew everything. I know, I want you to take it. That's cheap. There was.